Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a preview for you of an upcoming Tier 10 French heavy tank that's going to arrive in update 921 next month. It is the AMX M4 MLE 54. The AMX 54 is pretty much as if a Liberté grew up and reached tier 10. It's got awesome upper hull armor, 320mm of effective armor there, a decent lower plate, its turret is very strong indeed apart from a cupola on top, and it comes with a choice of two different guns. The 120mm main armament that you see here that makes this vehicle similar to a Super Conqueror, or you can increase the caliber to 130mm and it becomes a bit more like a Panzer 7, or alternatively a Type 5 heavy that isn't using the derp gun. This video will update you on everything there is to know about the AMX 54. Firstly, I'm going to compare it to some of its tier 10 competition, and then I'm going to follow up with multiple helpings of ace tanker gameplay with both of the caliber guns that this tank can use. And if you have no interest in picking up the brand new tier 10 French heavy tank, then I will let you know how to take them out effectively on the battlefield when they reach the game next month in update 921. So without further ado, let's get started. So firstly, as I highlighted in my patch preview video, if you want to get your hands on these three new French heavy tanks as quickly as you can, then uncheck accelerated crew training in your AMX M4 45 and you will have to save up 62,500 experience to be able to get the AMX 65T quickly. And crew loadout wise, the AMX M4 54 is the same as the AMX M4 45, that tier 7 French heavy tank. It uses a commander, a gunner, a driver, a radio operator, and a loader. And so if you've already got yourself an AMX M4 Liberté, then this is going to be the perfect crew training tank for the new tier 10 French heavy. So now let's see how the AMX 54 stacks up to the recent addition to the game, the Super Conqueror, and also the Panzer 7 and the other tier 10 French heavy tank, the AMX 50B. And in this comparison, the AMX 54 on the left is the one using the 120mm main armament, while the one on the right is using the 130mm. So immediately we notice that the damage per minute of this vehicle is rather lackluster, both with the 120mm and it's even worse with the 130mm when we compare this tank to the Super Conqueror and also the AMX 50B, with the DPM only slightly higher with the 130mm than that of the Panzer 7. Consequently, it takes the AMX 54 substantially longer periods of time to vanquish what's ever in front of it, and the DPM increase isn't really even significant, going from the 130mm up to the 120. But take a look at the penetration on this 120mm main armament. It's a fantastic 264. I think that's the best of any of the heavy tanks at tier 10. And if you elect to use premium rounds on the 120mm, then your penetration goes up to 325, which is very decent indeed. However, if you use the 120mm on this tank, your penetration drops to 250 with standard ammunition, and look how garbage the penetration is with the premium rounds. It uses premium armor piercing rounds, a lot like on the standard gun on the Type 5 heavy, and they have 280mm of penetration. That's just really not very competitive for a premium round in an age of escalating importance of armor. So immediately two big downsides to using the larger caliber gun, but of course your alpha damage increases from the standard 400 to 560. And that makes this tank feel rather meaty. And as you'll see later on in the gameplay, the AMX 54 with the 130mm quite often has the edge in a trading matchup. However, you're going to have to sacrifice shell velocity to be able to gain that alpha damage. It goes down to 840, which is awful compared to the Panzer 7's fantastic 1,100 meters a second shell velocity with its standard rounds. And if you elect to fire premium rounds with this vehicle, well, the shell velocity stays the same, so you're only gaining 30mm of penetration. Whereas with the Panzer 7, that vehicle has APCR rounds, which have a 1,350 meters a second shell velocity, which makes it a much better sniper. Moving on now to gun handling, and this is where the AMX 54 is fantastic with both of its gun calibers. 1.8 seconds aim time, that's even better than the Super Conqueror, and 2.2 seconds on the larger caliber gun is significantly better than that of the Panzer 7 at 2.6. Accuracy wise, the 120mm is 0.33, that's rather good indeed, better than the 50B, the same as the Super Conqueror, and if you use the larger caliber gun, 0.35 is the same as the 50B, but better than the Panzer 7. Dispersion wise, the AMX 54 is significantly worse on the move at 0.18 compared to the Super Conqueror with a fantastic .12, but its turret traverse dispersion when you use the 120mm is actually superior to that of the Super Conqueror, and that means that when you use the 120mm on this tank, you're pretty much snapshotting more like a medium than a heavy. Unfortunately, this dispersion gets slightly worse if you use the larger caliber gun, but it's still going to be just as good as the Super Conqueror, but slightly worse than the Panzer VII when it uses that 128mm main armament. Gun depression wise, the AMX 54 has 8 degrees from this section of the tank all the way around to the other, but it has absolutely no gun depression, well, 2 degrees over the back of the vehicle, so if you can get behind one of these, it's only going to be able to shoot you in the top of the turret. And this 8 degrees of gun depression just doesn't really stack up compared to the 10 degrees of the Super Conqueror. And that's something that I really noticed in the gameplay, that it's far harder to find a ridgeline that you can go hull down on compared to the most recent British Tier 10. But at least the 8 degrees of gun depression is the same for both of the calibers of gun and is better than the Panzer VII's 7 degrees. Now on to mobility, and this is where it's both good and also bad news for the AMX 54. 40 kilometers an hour forwards, 15 backwards, that's way better than the Super Conqueror and significantly better forwards than the Panzer VII. But, you know, the AMX 50B is going to be running rings round its new competition. But that's kind of to be expected when we take a look at the armor in a second. Engine power wise, the 54 has a fantastic 1,200 horsepower engine like the Panzer VII and the AMX 50B. This makes its power to weight ratio really good. 15 horsepower per ton, demolishes the Super Conqueror and the Panzer VII, and it really makes this one of the more mobile heavy tanks. Unfortunately, the ground resistances are not quite as good as the Super Conqueror and the Panzer VII on hard and medium, but they are identical on soft. And the turret traverse on this vehicle is 32 degrees a second, the same as the Super Conqueror and massively better than the Panzer VII. And that makes the AMX 54, if you use the larger caliber gun, quite an interesting vehicle, because all of the other large caliber guns on heavy tanks like on the Type 5 Heavy, the Panzer VII, and also on the E100 have very slow turning turrets. This thing's going to be able to turn quickly and snapshot you. And the tank traverse on this vehicle is 32 degrees a second. That's one of the best for, shall we say, one of the more heavy tanks out there, which allows this vehicle to traverse more like a medium tank, and it's going to be turning 50% faster than that of the Super Conqueror and the Panzer VII. So far we found out that the AMX 54 has 2 competitive guns of different caliber with excellent gun handling respective of their calibers, and it's also one of the fastest heavy tanks at Tier 10. So is the armor going to be a significant downside for the vehicle? Well, it doesn't look like it. Look at this, 220mm on the front, 300 on the front of the turret. That makes this tank absolutely awesome for a frontal engagement. If you're in front of the AMX 54 in this position, its lower plate armor is 270. That's going to be 50-50 bouncing Tier 10 guns, and Tier 8s and 9s are going to have no chance to go through there. The mid plate here is 300, the upper plate is 300 to 310, and the cheeks are 340, and the turret, well, this is 300mm all around here up to here. It's 400mm of effective armor, and the mantlet, well, it's hit and miss. Some of it 300, some of it down to 280 above and below it, but above 600, but it has these awful cupolas on top of the tank. But when it's using its gun depression, these are actually rather hard to hit, as we can see here. But the key weaknesses of this tank are the side armor, 60mm on the side of the hull and 80mm on the side of the turret. And take a look at this. Oh my word, that is a fat, awful side profile. Just the whole of this tank, I got penetrated by more high explosive rounds and HESH rounds. You know how many people are driving Type 5 Heavies and FV405 Stage 2s on the test server. I got one shot, or shall I say, lost 60% of my hit points more times in this tank than I think I have ever done on a test server before. And that makes the armor of the AMX 54 such a contrasting experience. Frontally, if they miss your cupolas, you're bouncing premium rounds from Tier 10 tanks. Side on, you're getting penetrated by high explosive rounds just constantly. And considering how big the side profile is, it's not a hard thing to hit. Another thing I should mention is look at the fact that the top of the turret is sloped in this way. So that means that if we draw a line from the gun to the back here, if you can see your opponents, you have to stick up this big old fat head over a ridge line, which means that you quite often get shot here and here without even knowing that you could be spotted. And another word of advice in the AMX 54 is as soon as you angle it to maybe try and increase the effectiveness of your lower plate armor, like you would do in a Liberté like this, then the whole of this plate here becomes rather weak, and even tier 8 standard rounds are going to be able to go through here at least 50% of the time. And so if you see an AMX 54 over-angling to try and improve his lower plate, then just shoot him in the cheeks here. You can do it on both sides, and it'll be super easy. And if he angles even slightly more, then just shoot him here. You'll track him, lock him in place, or you can shoot the side of the tank easy. And so this means that if you're driving an AMX 54, you should do everything you can to keep the frontal part of your tank towards your opponent completely flat. We're talking about almost no angling here, or people are going to shoot you on your cheeks. Get up in their face, angle towards them, or alternatively, if you actually decide to make it round a corner and expose your hull. I have bounced so many shells on the test server by coming around a corner like this, hiding your inner plate, and people just think, well, I'll shoot the front of the hull, and it's phenomenally effective. So hit points wise, the vehicle has an okay 2,200. That's not nearly as good as the Super Conqueror and the Panzer 7, but at least it's slightly better than the 50B. And its view range, well, 390, that's rather disappointing. And it means that if you want to try and get away without using coated optics on this tank and using vents, then even if you have your vehicle completely, fully tricked out, then you can only get 460 meters view range. But you know what? I think that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's see how the AMX 54 holds up with both calibers of guns in some gameplay. So first up, we're rolling out on Siegfried line with the 120mm gun. So remember, what do we have here? We have better aim time, we have better gun handling, especially when we turn the turret traverse, it's going to be 20% better. Our DPM is slightly better, we got a better rate of fire, and the premium rounds on this vehicle are fantastic with the 120mm, 325mm of penetration. Now, of course, when you have less alpha damage, you've got to really try to use that rate of fire. But then again, with this tank, the rate of fire isn't even that much better, especially compared to something like a Super Conqueror. We are firing, what is the rate of fire of this vehicle base? 5.5 rounds a minute? Oh gosh, the Super Conqueror, I believe, is at about 6.9 seconds base. You're firing 1.5 rounds a minute more in the Super Conqueror with the same caliber gun. So now this AFV4005 has managed to get into a very awkward scenario here. He's exposing the whole of his turret, and we're just going to take advantage of that. Give him 2 quick shots and shut him down. And what I'm trying to do really hard right now is micromanage getting shot from the right and shot from the left. You see how I'm looking around, and that's because I'm absolutely paranoid, guys. Every time you expose too much of this tank, then you do end up getting penetrated in the side of the turret. But the first shell goes in there, and look, exactly what I was talking about. I over-angled my side armor, and so the Super Conqueror was easily able to shoot the cheeks. You really need to keep your frontal armor completely onto your opponents to make use of all of the armor that this tank has. So we put 1 round there into the mouse, and we get shot in the side of the turret by the IS-7. And yeah, just look at this. How unbelievably frustrating is that? And this is what I'm talking about with the fact that the top of the tank sticks up massively. And I'm glad I was able to show you there that the cupolas on the AMX 54, when you're these kind of warts on top of the tank, when you're not using your gun depression, are clearly visible. We managed to shut down the AMX 54 on the enemy team because he exposed them. But this is really, I couldn't find a better moment in all of my gameplay to just showcase the kind of thought process and the sheer terror that I had to learn in this tank, and it took me quite a few games to be able to pick it up, about how careful you have to be with exposing your turret when you've got such a big, fat head and you've got this gigantic side profile. It's almost as if you're playing a Stridsvagn 74 just at tier 10, and it's I don't know, it's been eating all of the food and it's just gigantic, or maybe it's got a fantastic ego or something, a fantastically gigantic ego. And look at here, we go up, we get shot by the IS-4 in the side of the turret, then we get shot by the Super Conqueror, but the aim time is fantastic. And look at this, this is just it. Look at all these annoying shots through the side of the turret here, all of them here as well. They just seem to be able to find hits, whereas if you're playing something like a Super Conqueror, you've got spaced armor all along this part, you've got spaced armor all along here. It's not easy for them to hit. And when people do fire heat rounds at you, and luckily not many tanks have been firing heat rounds at us, even that IS-4 wasn't, then the Super Conqueror is fantastic against heat rounds. But this vehicle without the spaced armor guard's not quite so good. I have no idea how that hit. Test servers are obviously extra laggy. I'm not sure where I was aiming. I think I was trying to hit the Leopard, but somehow I caught the Gorilla. Nevertheless, we've been reduced now to 93 hit points, but we're going to see if we can try to dig in here. So I've pulled back down the ridge. Doesn't look like anybody's going to be flanking me from my right. They're not going to be coming out the town because we dealt with them. We're at 3,600 damage. You notice this vehicle just doesn't seem to really rip anything apart quickly. But, you know, it's quite reliable. It's got good accuracy at 0.33 with this 120mm. And its precision can be very good with its low aim time. So even if somebody's moving, you've got enough time to adjust your aim. And we track the IS-7, lock him in place. Now we pop up, we've got him exactly where we want him. And I loaded a premium round there, I'd like to say. I think I've only been firing AP rounds so far, but I think I'm going to need to fire some APCR at the front of this IS-7. Especially when he tries to over-angle his tank there. Maybe I can go through the side of the tank. Now, I really want him to miss or bounce, but we can go right through his upper plate. But even his premium round can't go through my turret. And in this scenario, the hull armor of the IS-7 is just way worse than the majority of the armor on the front of my tank. And of course, the IS-7's beak armor, if he can hide that lower plate, is just absolutely awesome. But when he turns his vehicle to the side, well, it's going to be much more difficult for him, and I get nice flat surfaces on the side of his armor to shoot at. So when you think about it, this vehicle is fairly similar to an IS-7 in a way. You just want to keep the frontal part of your tank facing your opponents. Now I bounce off the Leopard, he bounces off me. We're going to reload a shell and see if we can finish him off. Will we be able to? Yeah, there we go. And that's where this tank feels really nice, actually. I've been really enjoying this tank from the pop up on the ridgeline, snap a shot and pull back. It feels like it does very well against medium tanks, because a medium tank will quite often rely on a heavy having quite poor dispersion values, especially when it turns the turret, and poor aim time. And so they're relying on shooting you first and then pulling back, and hopefully you panic and you miss. But with the AMX 54, that really wasn't happening to me all that much. IS-7 out of position, one into the side of him, and this is the beautiful opportunity to go after this Badger. And I guess this 120mm definitely way better than the 130mm in that scenario, where you want to just put out more rounds on tanks with low hit points. And I guess I'm going to save my conclusion about which gun I would use and why till later on. But in that kind of a scenario, if I'd just been with the other caliber gun, I would have a worse rate of fire. I would have had to invested all of that extra alpha damage in taking him on. And again, we find ourselves in a scenario against a Badger where he's on 326 hit points. I'll have to roll really, really low with this tank to not take him out. He bounces off me. I crest the ridge. Good aim time, good accuracy. Bang into the lower plate of the Badger. Shut him down. Now up to a top gun. And up to 5,600 damage, but we're going to have to do some work here. It's me and a T110E4 against two tanks on the enemy team who have 4 kills apiece. I'm hoping I could get a shot into the Type 5. Oh no. While the aim time and the accuracy on this tank are very good, they weren't quite that good. And that 4005 has 1,000 hit points, so surely he should just rush into me. I'd have to shoot him 3 times? Okay, that changes things. Wow, T110E4 clearly using a high explosive round there, shuts down the big old fat head of the FV4005, and now all that's left is to pick apart the Type 5 Heavy. What a kill there by the T110E4. He's had a bit of a cracking game, as I'll be showing you later on in the post-game stats. So right now I'm just thinking, let's flank this Type 5. He fires at the E4. E4 fires a high explosive round at him, and I just come around the corner and secure my 7th kill and the game with it. And GG, Marthe on the RU server. Spicy Mobile, sure, it was enjoyable to play with you here. 11 kills between us. Sure, it's a test server, but it's really nice to just show off this 120mm. So now we're using the 130mm main armament, so our alpha damage has gone up from 400 to 560. But there's quite a few things that are worse about the tank as well. Firstly, DPM down. We've gone from 2,200 down to about 2,125, 75 DPM lost. It can make a difference. The penetration on the standard rounds has gone down from 264 to 250 to be exact, and our premium rounds have gone from 325 with great shell velocity all the way down to 280 with rather abysmal shell velocity. We've lost shell velocity on our standard rounds as well, which makes it quite hard to snap at long range targets. Our aim time is significantly worse, our accuracy is worse, our dispersion on our turret is worse. Everything is just worse about this gun. But you know, all of these soft statistics, so to say, get it right, What does it even matter if you're putting 560 alpha damage in with every shot into your opponents? And you're going to have to, in the end, it's just a feel. Some people prefer tanks with larger amounts of damage on their alpha shells. Some prefer better gun handling, DPM, or basically everything else is better. So in the end, you're going to have to make that decision for yourself. Do you want the 400 alpha with the better everything, or do you want the 560 alpha to be able to trade more effectively? So we're unable to go through the lower plate of the Badger there. On the side to the left and the right, that thing's got 280 millimeters of effective armor, quite hard to go through. I'm going to maybe try and snipe at the top of this Type 5. No, I found a shot right into the Badger. That's really weird. He rolls exceptionally high against me. 571 out of 480. What do I roll for against him? 573 out of 560. Well, not quite as good. But I do feel like when you do penetrate in this tank, you do trade up effectively. And what you're seeing here is that I literally just drive out frontally when I'm getting shot by my opponents here. It doesn't even really matter because obviously your weak points are on your right-hand side of the vehicle. Looks like that Super Conqueror actually found one. We'll have to take a look in a second, see if we can manage to penetrate him here. Yeah, 512. Where did that Super Conqueror go through us again? Once again, the cheeks. I exposed too much of my inner cheeks, which was an easy shot for the Super Conqueror to be able to get me with. So right now, I mean, I've put in 3 shots, not a bad game so far. Now we're going to sneak up on this ridge and try and flank these guys. And I'm not sure if they expected me to be able to go up here. I don't think I've ever been up here myself, but I saw the opportunity and I'm going to try and make use of it. One into the side of the T-54, reloading here. Can we put the extra one into the side of the T-54 as we slip our way down the slope and finish him off? Oh, that was a feels good moment. Okay, 1 kill now. 2,500 damage in the first 3 minutes of the game. Sure, you're not going to be able to rack up the damage quickly, but I feel like it also allows you to be more effective with your trades. You can wait for that opportunity and you could just punish somebody much more heavily when they miss. And considering that the 120mm doesn't really have that much more DPM than this tank, it's not like it's a Super Conqueror. Plus, then this tank, I mean, then the 130mm, it's not like this is a Super Conqueror, for example. Then it feels like it's not too bad to make the trade when we get to put in big old alpha shots like this. 546, and if I was using the 120mm, I would be trying to push round now. I'd be trying to maybe get up in the faces of my opponents to be able to keep the rate of fire going. But when you don't have to fire as often, that means you can pull back between your shots. And many of you will find that this is a more comfortable playstyle that you can enjoy. Now we're reloading a high explosive round, I believe, here, and we do 727 to him. Now, having penetrated him, we're going to load armor piercing again. One thing I will mention, though, is the high explosive rounds on this 130mm are a little bit disappointing. The alpha damage only goes up from 560, well, I guess I can show you in-game by mousing over, to 640. Okay, that's only an 80 increase. That's rather abysmal, actually, when we take into account that on the 120mm, you go from 400 up to 515. So the high explosive rounds on this large caliber gun, very underwhelming. When we look at the 140mm that the Type 5 has, for example, it has 600 alpha with its armor piercing rounds, and I believe it's got 770 with its high explosive rounds. It might be slightly less than that. But all I'm saying is that this gun, I mean, the alpha feels great, but Wargaming, I guess, are kind of balancing it in a way, or maybe they're just afraid of it being too good by giving it poor premium rounds and giving it poor high explosive rounds. But you know what? And everything is subject to change. This is stage 1 of the test server. Who knows what Wargaming are going to feel? Maybe they'll mix things up, and if they do, maybe they'll give the premium rounds on the larger caliber gun better penetration, or maybe they'll bump up the damage of the high explosive rounds a little bit. And at the end of the game here, this higher alpha damage really played out in our favor, picking up 6,500 damage in 5 minutes. But before you all jump up and think you found the heavy tank of your dreams, I'd like to have a bit of a reality check here, guys. I don't think I could play on a test server without being just spammed with premium rounds. And look at this T-57 Heavy. He fires first one on his move, second one in, third one in, and fourth one in. He's just pretty much just auto-aiming at my turret, guys. All 3 heat rounds going through what you would think would be the protection against the heat rounds, the spacing on the turret. And that made my experience of this tank just such a conflicting experience when things go well and people are sitting in front of you and don't just pay to win by dabbing that 2 key. Things go really nicely, but as soon as you expose that side armor, it's a disaster, especially against high caliber, high explosive rounds. And when somebody dabs that 2 key and just auto aims at your turret, it feels like they just go in very convincingly. So now let's take a look at the post-game stats for both of those replays with the different caliber guns. Firstly, the 120mm Ace Tank, Top Gun, Steel Wall, and a Spartan as well for ricocheting with less than 10% of our remaining hit points. 2,208 experience with a premium account, that's decent. 5,700 damage and 7 kills, but wow, look at that E4. He was up to 7,200 damage. No wonder he got the high caliber. And we did fire a few premium rounds this game, so we barely make a profit. Next up, using the 130mm, once again an ace tanker, this time less experience points, 1,821. But a high caliber this time and a Confederate for supporting our team. 6,500 damage dealt for our 2 kills, 1,214 base experience points. And this time I don't believe we fired any premium rounds. And so we spend very little on ammunition and we make 44,000 credits profit. So all in all, I know both of these guns can work, both the 120mm caliber gun and the 130. Personally, for me, I'm of a split decision as to what gun I would want to use on this vehicle. Clearly, the 120mm has the better DPM, the better shell velocity, the better penetration on standard and APCR. It's got better gun handling, better aim time accuracy, the list goes on. And the only advantage you get with that 130mm caliber gun is the alpha damage. But here's the problem with the AMX M4 54 in my opinion. This tank, if you just want to work a ridgeline and you want to continuously fire at your opponents, is pretty much inferior to a Super Conqueror, with all regards apart from, I'd say, the lower plate. However, the Super Conqueror cannot use a 130mm caliber gun, and when we compare this to the gun of the Panzer VII, apart from penetration and shell velocity, it is superior. And so this bizarre little thing in my head saying that while the 120mm caliber gun might be more competitive on this vehicle and the better gun to use on the tank, if you want to play this tank in that way, well, you might as well be playing the Super Conqueror. And so I might actually use the larger caliber gun on this vehicle, try and trade more effectively, expose the weak points on the top and the side of the turret less, and think of this vehicle as some kind of reasonably fast, high alpha damage, snapshotting monster. And while I accept what I'm saying is kind of illogical that I would want to use the worst gun on the tank, at least in my opinion, but at least then I'm never going to be thinking that I'm just a mediocre Super Conqueror, and I'll have a niche and a playstyle that I'll actually want to play this tank for. So all in all, do I think the AMX 54 is going to be a game-changing, meta-breaking tank, kind of like we've seen the Super Conqueror be? Well, no, I don't think that's going to be the case. But then again, when we look at the last test server, remember when they first introduced the Super Conqueror, it looked like it was actually just worse than an FV215B with the same gun depression, a worse rate of fire, worse gun handling, everything about the tank was worse, and they updated it in stage 2 of the test server. So maybe we're going to see Wargaming do something similar with the AMX 54 here. But as it stands, I wouldn't worry too much about grinding your pants off to be able to get this vehicle, as I think the Super Conqueror and even arguably the T110E5, which is very similar to this tank, kind of do it better already. And so that's it for this video today, ladies and gentlemen. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun with the review today. If you did too, consider giving this video a like. I'd really appreciate it. But if you hated it, give it a thumbs down and let me know why in the comments. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.